Welcome to TRS Clips, where you'll find happiness through your own curiosity. Martin Luther King had visited India.
Martin Luther King had visited India in 1959 for 5 weeks.
Wow.
Nobody goes anywhere for 5 weeks.
I've never heard the story.
So when I was reading his autobiography, the first sentence of his autobiography chapter on India, it's a 30-page chapter. The first sentence, if I travel to any other country, I would go as a tourist. Here in India, I came as a pilgrim. That touched my heart because what he's writing is his travel in India when there is no McDonald's, when there is no Marriott hotels, freeways. It's an India that we also don't know. And if I put myself in his shoes, at those days, they used to be called by the N-word. Right? And he's writing about being received as Atithi Devo Bhava, as God. Can you imagine what must have happened to his heart? That's what he has written in his autobiography.
Do you know where he went in India?
All over the place. He came, first stop was in Bombay. He came as a state guest with his wife. He was put up in the Taj Hotel. But he said, I want to go where Gandhi used to live.
Pause. Just give some context on who Martin Luther King is for people who've not heard the name, because there's a big chunk of Indian audiences here as well.
So Martin Luther King Jr. is a American Baptist pastor. He was one of the leaders of the civil rights movement in the 50s and 60s that ushered this social justice and equality for all movement in the United States. And they had already done the Montgomery bus boycott with Rosa Parks, etc., in 1955.
On an everyday level, what did that mean for the average black person in America?
Racism. It's like you're not able to enter this restaurant. I can't drink from whatever the tap you are using, and all kinds of horrible things. If you look at it, it's like just 60, 70 years ago.
Yeah, we read about apartheid in Africa, but there was a softer version of apartheid in America as well, towards black people.
Towards
colored people, not black people.
Not softer, harder version of it.
More than what we
heard deep.
About.
These wounds are deep. We don't know anything about it. I also did not have to know anything about this. But because I have chosen to live with the people that I am now living, I had to learn all of this.
Can we do a quick, tiny history recap? Just for the sake of conversation and for the sake of context. So when European immigrants start immigrating into America and are gradually taking over the land of the Native Americans, the natives begin to get sidetracked. We can't get into the depths of that history. But what is to be mentioned here is that the European immigrants, many of them brought slaves of African origin with them.
Correct.
On ships.
Correct.
Now, these slaves were members of certain tribes in Africa which were either conquered by the European imperialists or were beaten by other African tribes and sold to the European imperialists.
Correct.
African Americans, or the ancestors of the modern African American, were brought to America through slave trade.
Correct.
And slavery went on for roughly 400 years.
Correct.
But 400 years in the long-term scheme of things is not that long ago. It feels like now.
For us, yeah.
The Civil War happened somewhere in the 1850s.
1850s, yeah.
Right? Which is a little more than 150 years ago.
Yeah.
A 150-year difference, again, is not much from a historical perspective. 1,000 years later, people are going to look at our generations as possibly very close to this Civil War and slave trade generation.
Yes.
Now I'll hand it over to you, sir. Is there anything you'd like to add to this historical context? Because what happened post the American Civil War and what happened in the 1950s because of Martin Luther King Jr.?
Yeah, so Martin Luther King Jr., like I said, he was instructed by his mentor. He has just recently passed away, Reverend James Lawson, who I also had the privilege of meeting in Los Angeles. I think he was 95 years old last few weeks ago that he has passed away. He told me that he had been to India and he had met Gandhi. So he told young Martin Luther King that if you want to use non-violence as your cornerstone for the civil rights movement, you need to go and learn from the source. So Dr. King, he came with his wife on a 5-week pilgrimage.
Sorry, sir. What happened in the 100 years between 1850 and 1950? Slavery was abolished in America roughly after the Civil War.
Yeah, that's the Abraham Lincoln legacy. Slavery is abolished.
But what happened to all those people of African American origin?
Yes, so now what I'm learning again is trauma is also intergenerational. So the trauma of the ancestors has passed through DNA to the current lineage of the African American immigrants. And that is where more needs to be done, because trauma of any type, if it is not healed, shapes everything in our life. Our inhibitions, our biases, our judgments. And so you have to empathize with this truth, you can call it. And you have to provide them. And this is modern science speaking, right? So it's not Mandar gibberish speaking. Modern science has now put it out there that there is intergenerational trauma, and through pranayama practices, you can heal that intergenerational trauma at a DNA level. That is again, modern science has proof. That's the missing link. If you don't heal that trauma, not of today's person, but lineage, then that person's inhibition, that person's biases, that person's choices in life will be guided by the ancestral lineage trauma that he's carrying.
Hey, if you enjoyed today's clip, make sure you check out all the other clips we've uploaded on this channel. You'll find a clip related to almost every single topic as long as you're willing to search for it.